Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. It's been a week. That was the title of State of the Realm this last week as well, and woo, what a time. I don't think much else really needs to be said. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions about it in the comments section below. So I just want to do a couple of quick announcements. Number one, we do have patch coming on Tuesday. I will be doing first impression videos on the Relic. I will be doing first impression videos on the second planet for Cosmic Exploration. And we will have a State of the Realm on both those things as well in the coming week. I also did play the Blue Protocol closed beta, and we'll be doing a thoughts video on that probably later in the week. I might want to get like one or two more sessions in on it. I do also have some other video projects that are on my mind, but it'll be a matter of whether or not I get to them. And for those of you who have been wondering where State of the Realm went in podcast format, the RSS feed was not working for some time, so I stopped trying. I actually tried this morning, and I managed to get it to work. So we should have State of the Realm back in audio format for those of you who have been waiting for that. So be sure to go give it a peek. I'm actually recording this Saturday morning. It is 6:46 a.m. I know I keep bringing up the 6 a.m. wake up, but it's more like that's actually my normal time to be up. I usually wake up about 6. And this morning I was up even earlier because cats be cattin'. So I want to get this done because I don't know if I'm going to have time in the next couple days to get it done. So sorry if you asked the question on Sunday. But with that, thanks to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. Support here is completely optional as long as you watch and enjoy the videos. That's fine by me. But I always like to throw an extra thank you out for that with a link in the description. Also, if you're ever looking for hardware peripherals, don't forget SteelSeries sponsors the channel. There's a 12% discount code year round. Use better discounts if they're there, but use my link because it supports the channel. Anyway, let's get on to the Q&A. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey Haps, hi. After reading what Yoshi had to say about the Mare takedown, I don't know why I say Mare. I know it's Mare Lamentorum. So like, just call it Mare. I became frustrated with what his response meant for things like that Nintendo game and everything else that exists in the realm of making combat easier. That Nintendo game. What? I actually don't know what you're talking about. I feel like I should. That Nintendo game. Mario? I actually have no idea what you're talking about, but it's maybe my brain doesn't work that well. What do you think it would take for Square Enix to take down combat tools or take measures against their ability to interact with the game? Looking back at Top UAV, SE punished the team, but the tools still exist in many form. I think the rule is generally the same. If it was adopted en masse and it made their ability to develop raids seem completely irrelevant, that would be what it takes. But for anyone who's not competing on the top level and is just using the tool locally, they're hard pressed to do anything but punish those who just become too public about it. And honestly, I think that's fine. I don't like that those tools exist. But at the end of the day, all I care about is my raiding experience. And the people I raid with, we have a set rule where we don't want any of this because we just want to avoid all the drama. Some of us were around for what happened during Top. Some of the people have been in the group that I was in during Top, and we just literally want to avoid that situation at all costs and just be able to focus on having fun. And so, you know, the groups I've been raiding with have like an anti-third-party tool rule. And fingers crossed they're actually fucking following it, but I've played with some of them long enough to know that they honestly don't like using that stuff anyway, so it gives me a bit of security in that form. But that's kind of how I feel about it at this point. It's become so widespread that me kind of complaining and wishing it would all get deleted. Like, I used to do that years ago, and it's just not worth the energy. I can instead just focus on the experience I'm having and with the people I'm having it with, and just try to keep that as in line with the experience that I want, and then let the people who have the experiences that they want. And then whenever something happens publicly, whether it happened to me again in the future with somebody I'm playing with or happened to another group, just kind of becomes a community meme, and maybe they'll be punished. Maybe the abused mod will be taken down. You don't know, but at the end of the day, I think that you can apply exactly the same rules from that to the raid tools, and in most cases, they'll probably be fine. It's actually a surprise to me that something so widespread as FF logs, they won't do anything about, but that's also because Yoshi P has very explicitly stated that DPS meters are like a super normal thing, and that it's like if they I think they know if they take down how people do DPS meters, it's actually going to be the raiders are going to be absolutely livid. It's a very, very useful tool that is pretty much standard across every game in the genre. And I do wonder if at some point they'll just put like personal meters in the game. Like people have been asking for that for years. But even so, it wouldn't stop the use of FF logs anyway. It wouldn't stop the use of ACT. But all the same, he's acknowledged it's like an absolutely massive tool that he considers a pretty standard thing. It's just that they can't officially support. Oh yeah, go ahead and use it. Just don't get caught, basically. But I think, yeah, it would have to really destroy the integrity of rating as a whole. And I don't think that stuff does. Most people don't even really know, or like you may have like 1 or 2 people out of 8 in any given case that's actually using them. So I think that's really what it boils down to. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Mrhappy. Hi. Hope your week is going well. Yeah, it's actually been, despite all the chaos, it's actually been a good week for me. It's a bit of an idle question this week. Sure, all questions are welcome. If you were able to puppeteer Yoshi P remotely, that's a bleak outlook. I don't even want to imagine a life where I can do that. And have him direct the team to solve exactly one pet peeve of you. I mean, it would be the friends list. Honestly, here's the thing. I don't even interact with the friends list that much. I have, the capped number of friends, and I open it when I need to. But I think that's because it's so frustratingly, like, just ineffective at its job. I look at that as a core aspect of Final Fantasy XIV that has been lacking for some time. In fact, at the start... Was that at the start of Dawn Trail? It might have been at the start of Dawn Trail or at the end of Endwalker. I made a video going over the friends list and all the game's social features that have been spread out over several features. Like a lot of the fellowship functionality should be like just part of it. It shouldn't exist. It should be baked into the other things. Now, obviously, there's probably spaghetti code issues for that could eventually be overcome, but it would be easier to make a brand new feature. But like seeing the way that the link shells and the crossworld link shell lists are separate, and there's not even a keybind for one of them, and fellowships exist, but fellowships just asked is like, if you put all of those into one feature and modernize them, you'd have a pretty solid in-game social function. But they're just basically broken up into several bits. And so for me, as much as I don't think it would affect whether or not I enjoy Final Fantasy XIV, I use Discord, I have my stream, I have social media, like I have plenty of ways of interacting. It's such a glaringly dysfunctional core feature. I would feel better knowing it got fixed for everyone else who may use it more than me. And who knows, maybe if they did, maybe if they modernize it, I would use it. I just feel like it's one of the biggest, like, in-your-face issues of Final Fantasy XIV. So it would be that. 100% it would be the friends list. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hi, hello, hi. One extra for someone who missed it. Thanks. 2 questions, sure. How do you feel about reward structure for content in 14 compared to other MMOs? I've heard people complain that current rewards aren't good enough. /enough, confuse me. When asked what else should be added in the mix, only 2 suggestions I've heard were new animations and gear. So Final Fantasy XIV is a game where the content is supposed to be the reward, and the reward is there formally because there has to be an incentive to do it. And a lot of Final Fantasy XIV's reward structure actually suffers from one of its better strengths in that of its average gear to job balancing. Gear is very bland in Final Fantasy XIV. It doesn't try to be more than what it is. It gives you more stats, which will make you stronger, and you'll definitely see numbers go up, but nothing will fundamentally alter the way that you approach any given situation. Because of that, adding more gear to the rewards of other things to incentivize them, it actually becomes a lot tougher to make players look at that gear as valuable. And as such, the only way they really achieve that is by creating alternate pieces of content, things like exploration zones, that have their own sense of internal gear progression. So I think that is the biggest flaw. Final Fantasy XIV does a good job of rewarding minions, mounts, cosmetics, emotes. There's like plenty of just general rewards that give you more social options or give you more, I guess, visual clout, I suppose we'll call it. But in terms of the actual advancement of your character, Final Fantasy XIV suffers from that one particular regard. So new animations on a piece, like let's say you pick up your relic bow, and your relic bow changes the animation of one of your skills. Now you can kind of incentivize people to grind for it a little bit longer, and it's more valuable to the individual player. So you don't have to just do like, a one-time step in tomestones. You can be like, yeah, we put in all this work, so, we're going to make sure that it takes a while to get. And yeah, some people will still complain, but more people will be motivated because it won't be a piece of gear that's effectively outdated for the entirety of the expansion until the very end, which is what a relic really is right now. Yeah, or like, like you said, for gear, like more gearing options, like Honestly, I think that just more gearing options in general would be appreciated. Like if you could make reasonable progress to your gear by fate grinding for a really long time, but it's like obviously that's way longer than raiding, or if we had criterions rewarding gear or quantum reward gear, people would be more motivated. But I think gear needs to have more effects in more places. Like if you're going to release deep dungeon with weapons, I honestly think you make the weapons give people special effects inside of a deep dungeon, or at least a deep dungeon that it is specifically designed for. I think you have to maybe alter the way you design deep dungeons as a whole, which is then a problem in it of itself. But I think they need to, at some point, get a little bit more lenient about the whole we don't want gear throwing off job balance a whole lot aspect of the game, because that's kind of the one thing that keeps jobs really in line is the gear design. And as afraid as they are of losing that, I think they need to have some willingness to step out of that boundary and maybe introduce a little bit of chaos into the mix. At the very least, create more content islands where you're allowed to experiment with gear. Like, let's say you know, the deep dungeon weapon, when you're not inside of deep dungeon, it's just item level, just visuals, whatever. But inside of deep dungeon, let's say that, you know, every 30 seconds or so, or you get a new, how about this? You get a new ability on the deep dungeon menu that allows you to, you know, activate a trap sonar so that it can tell you, with a very vague message where the nearest trap is. And then maybe if you upgrade it all the way, it'll highlight the trap or something. Or, I don't know, something like that. Something that makes actually exploring through the deep dungeon. Because now players who are not as confident have like a sense of progression to go through. And may get them to actually try things that they wouldn't otherwise try. Or maybe another piece of equipment from a deep dungeon acts as... every time you advance a floor, it grants you a random pomander. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, they need to be willing to explore with like ideas like that in other pieces of content. And two, speaking of gear, with the question above, I thought about how to incentivize stuff like Quantum's reward structure outside of cosmetics. Do you think it's a good idea to introduce pink gear with Savage equivalent item level to the gearing treadmill? 2 secondary stats, 2 materia slots. I honestly think so. Diadem was kind of a funny situation because it had a higher item level, right? But, A, it was pink, so the stats are random, and B, it only came from one activity. I think they could potentially revisit pink gear to make it so that somebody could theoretically grind something better. Do I think that it would be that effective? Question mark. Only because we have enough gearing options in most cases as is that's not really that incentivized. Like, I suppose you could, I don't know, I guess you kind of starts to, I guess a comparison maybe Guild Wars 2's exotics versus the Ascended gear. When I think of Ascended gear, I think really more so of the use of it in fractals, but I mean, that's kind of like a similar thing. The response to Chaotix gear changing our abyss wasn't negative. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think they could maybe experiment with it, but I think there are other things that we need to do first. And I think loosening up the actual gear design is better than trying to come up with a rigid alternative in a rigid structure, which is kind of what this is. Because no matter what, you're still going to want the exact same secondaries. Maybe you get an extra secondary. You'd actually probably need 3 secondaries, not 2 secondaries. And then you would also need to be rolling on that. I mean, I think of the relic in Eureka, in Pyros. That worked pretty well. The, like, rolling for stats thing. Like, maybe you could sacrifice Ether Pool Grips, for example, in a deep dungeon, or the Offerings in Quantum, or something like that, to re-roll stats, and then re-rolling enough gives you more secondary rolls. And that could work. I think it could, but again, I think it's more important to come up with more creatively fun gear than it is to come up with another way to just alter substats that are otherwise still fitting into the same structure as they were before. But that's just me just having a different priority. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Oh, Kali! Wait, there we go. Oh, Kali. There we go. In a recent interview, Yoshi P said there's a non-zero chance that a new Disciple of Hander lane could be added if there's a justifiable purpose. How do you feel about a catcher job for gatherers? The idea, so I'm playing OSRS, this just making me think hunter, birdhouses, let me tell you. The idea would work is similar to Fisher, but for land critters like insects, reptiles, amphibians, even birds if we're feeling adventurous. You would have a log to complete collectibles, insects. Yeah, I think fishing is actually, I think you're on the right track. If they want to add a new gatherer, I think going along the lines of fishing is better than going along the lines of mining and botany, because fishing is already, as it is, a lot more of a collectible thing. Yes, there are fish that have uses, but when you think about adding, I might make a video with this exact idea, kind of just like purporting it out there, because okay, let me finish reading because I've already started thinking about how this gets used, and you might say the same thing. Compounds, okay, so things that are used for alchemist recipes, for alchemic compounds, and some can be displayed in terrariums. Yeah, that's exactly where my brain was going, is you could then create terrariums instead of aquariums. Just how Fisher has big fishing, there could be really rare critters that you find, which is absolutely a thing in real life. I think no matter what, whether or not it's this exact idea, you're on the right track of the exact type of gatherer. And honestly, when I think of archaeology from World of Warcraft, it's not too dissimilar from this in that same sense, in that you can find ancient bits of, the world, and then they can be put on display in homes and whatnot. Now, I think, of course, this comes back to housing being useful, but it may even make apartments more attractive of an option, especially if they ever decide to support them more in the future. Just having like your own little personal collection room of things like that and like working on the displays could be intriguing enough for a lot of people. And in fact, the aquarium, the Eorzea aquarium that's set up in game is basically set up that way. All of the FC rooms in the main house are basically all different aquarium rooms. And so now you have terrarium, now you have archaeology. I think you're just automatically on the right track by using fishing as the model, and not mining and botany, because then you don't have to come up with as many uses for the actual items. You can have some, like you've said, alchemical compounds would be fine. But no matter what, yeah, no, this is a good idea. And I rarely just take people's ideas. People know I'm not like, I don't like idea questions, but this one was really well thought up. And I think you're onto something. So I might even make a standalone video, just highlight this comic. It's just a good idea. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Howdy. Howdy. The final boss of Fork Tower Blood, Magitar, is based off Minotaur. I think it'd be safe to assume the final boss of Fork Tower Magic would be Omniscient or a variation of him. Yes. I think it would be odd if it wasn't. Now, the Magitar is actually hilarious. For those who don't play or haven't played Final Fantasy V, the Magitar, as they've said, is based on the Minotaur. Now, the way that Fork Tower Blood and Fork Tower Magic are actually done is one of them, you are not allowed to use physical attacks at all, and you have to use magic. That would be Fork Tower Magic. Fork Tower Blood, you are only allowed to, you're not allowed to use magic at all. So what ends up happening is the Minotaur is insanely powerful in terms of his physical prowess. But when he dies, he tries to cast Holy. And in this, he actually gets to cast Holy. So we finally got to see a version of Minotaur that can cast Holy. The other reference with Magitar is the sacred weapons. Final Fantasy V has an area with 12 sacred weapons. You have to basically collect these tablets, and each tablet allows you to collect 3 of the weapons. And he has some of those weapons, so I wonder if the Omniscient equivalent will have some of the more magic-y ones. I mean, actually, Magitar himself has a lot of the more magic-y ones. I wonder if Omniscient is going to have some more of the more physically focused ones. And it's going to have more of those sacred weapons. But yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it would be silly for me to predict anything other than Omniscient. My only reservation is that we know there is somebody who created these Fork Towers. Omniscient could be the second to last boss. And we could end up with a true final boss where I think it might be Enuo. Like, I've been saying Enuo is a very likely thing. We know there's a lot of void magic present in the Occult Crescent. And Enuo is, he was basically the guy X-Death went, I'm going to be like that guy. But he's way stronger and he's way older. So I'm wondering if we're going to see Enuo as well in Fork Tower Blood. Or Fork Tower Magic, sorry. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Haps. Hi. And have an extra hello. We got a couple extras today. Plus some extra dashes since you liked them so much from last week. I did like the dashes, but that's a lot of dashes. What do you think of the current state of the chaotic rate between being busy over Christmas period and then the reclear PF group going very hit or miss? I ended up with maybe 30 of each type of totem, still a ways off of either mount, but now it seems to pretty much die in the PF and I have to relearn the fight anyway. Personally, I think this situation where a few targeted nerfs make a fight more farmable in the PF environment could really give the fight a new lease on life. You think it would be a good idea or something that devs would even consider? I said this when Chaotic came out. It doesn't make sense for it to be item level synced. This is not an ultimate level encounter. It wasn't even supposed to be a savage level encounter. They said their goal was an extreme level encounter. I don't think Chaotic is something you need to preserve the difficulty on. I think just having the extra item level, it doesn't fix the body checks, but it gives you a lot more viability to get through it, and it makes people more willing to go back and visit it. I also think the whole enter with 12, but you can't really clear it with 12. I mean, if you're going to do that, then you really should just make it not item level synced. Like, that was the biggest issue. Like, the body checks, 100%, they should nerf them. But they also shouldn't be item level syncing it. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just not worth preserving in that form. And they overshot the difficulty by their own admission. So yeah, they should 100% be trying to make it more approachable, because I think Final Fantasy XIV, I think MMOs, actually, and this includes World of Warcraft, actually it especially includes World of Warcraft. Content is most valuable when it's not dead the moment it's cleared. It's most valuable when people gradually get access to it later down the line when it's no longer relevant. Now, you might argue, then why don't I feel that way about Ultimates? I think Ultimate's always relevant because it's only ever been relevant for its challenge. Chaotic was not relevant strictly for its challenge. And as such, I don't think it makes sense to do it this way. I feel kind of the same way about Criterion. Criterion Normal should not be item level synced. Criterion Savage probably shouldn't exist. But since it does, that I think is worth item level syncing. So I think there's a few things that they could do with this, but no, I completely agree. No, Chaotic, the one Chaotic fight we have at the moment, there's no reason for it to have any of these restrictions, and they should have honestly done a little more for it to support it long term, because that's where it will continue to be most valuable. Imagine next expansion, just seeing a Chaotic PF and being like, oh yeah, sure, I'd go for it. Yeah, Chaotic's in bonus, sure, we'll just unsync it, get 20 as close to 24 people as possible and just get a little bit of fun. It's not like it's going to be coveted by then, and it's still only going to be certain people technically going to do it. So yeah, no, they should do some stuff for Chaotic. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello. Hi. Hope your week has been doing well. It has. Thank you. I got a few questions. One, how loud do we have to be so that once a player finishes an MSQ roulette dungeon, we can just skip those cutscenes in Praetorium? The mobile version is making me wish they would just put some of the stuff in retail, or at least put bicolored gemstones in A Realm Reborn Heavensward Stormblood areas. Once a player finishes an MSQ, we can... You mean the final cutscene? Yeah, we should just be able to skip the final cutscene. Doesn't make sense to make us... Like, I get it. It's because of the player commendation system. They want all the players to be able to commend properly, but no, I don't think it's too annoying. Just let us skip that last cut. Just let's skip the last two cutscenes, like in both the dungeons, technically. So yeah, for sure. And two, are we going to have to be louder about the button bloat, because my crossbar is looking really bad at the moment. Button bloats, it hasn't gotten worse, or at least not noticeably worse. Whenever people say this about their cross hotbar, you have 48 buttons on that. I don't know what you're doing with 48 buttons, but make sure you have your double cross hotbar enabled, so it's not just 32. You should have pretty easy access to 48 buttons. So I don't think button bloats... It's better now than it was earlier. Depends on the job you're playing. Like Paladin and Scholar could probably use some trimming, but generally speaking, controller's doing all right. So I would... I don't know what else to tell you about that one. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello, Haps. Hi, and an extra hello in case anyone forgot. A lot of extras today. I like that. Long-time watcher, first-time asker. Welcome. During the statement Yoshi P put out regarding mods, he said he didn't want to have to divert resources to implement in-game measure. I think this could mean with the ever-changing laws worldwide that the topic of doing so has been brought up at internal meetings with executives and higher-ups in the company. The statement is potentially one last warning shot. I don't think it's the last warning shot. I think that it would take a lot for them to actually go this route. I think you're reading too deep into the statement, as you've suggested here at the end. But it's better to levy the possibility and present people with the idea of knowing that it's something they could do. Because if they really, really have to, they will. But I don't think that they are saying, hey, wink, wink, we're doing it if you don't stop. I don't think so. I think that when that time comes, they will just say it. They won't try to give us like a nudge. They'll just say, hey, if it doesn't stop, we're doing this. And that's the end of it. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hola. And just a quick question. Will adding a Bravely/default type system help with the job issue? Are you asking about BP? Not if every job has it, then it's just homogenized again. Imagine allow skill expression for really good players and accessibility. In a full active game, I would never want a system like that. And especially a system that is literally copy-pasted between every job in the game. And I don't think that's a good idea. And also, there's really only going to be one correct way to use those, and it's on your hardest hitting skill during a 1 or 2 minute window. And that's it. It's not going to add anything else to it. Like, unless you make everything like work entirely differently, it's effectively going to be everyone will use it on damage, because either they balance it around the idea that you'll use BP on healing and defensives, which they won't, because then players who don't use it well are screwed. Or B, they don't do that, and then everyone just uses it on damage. Which is all really that system has ever done for me. Like, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of uses for it in a single player game where you can like, I can absorb but 1 physical attack without taking damage, or I can absorb 4 of them, But no, I don't think that's in any way a good idea. And again, it doesn't help with job identity at all. Then everybody's generically on the same system. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Heyo, multiply that by 10 for any missed. Damn, I got a lot of extras and nowhere to use them yet this week. That doesn't mean that you don't do it next week. So I live in Hong Kong. Okay, having heard that they do FanFest up north last year, I did think about it, but I never knew how tickets worked. I do have an NA account though. I do have a feeling that general tickets for up north or Japan. Up north or Japan? Up north? Do you mean North America? Is that I'm not sure if you mean like, do they hold it like north of Hong Kong? I think they mean North America. Should be no problem. Just think it's better early. It might be my best choice. Would it be the case? I'm not banking on them braving coming to where we are, considering the only official presence was a small booth at the recent Comic-Con for the mobile game. I did think about it, never knew how tickets work. So the way it generally works is whatever region your account is registered for, you qualify to purchase tickets when they go on sale for that region. If you do not have an active subscription at the time, then you cannot buy the first wave of tickets, and you have to wait for general admission, and there's almost never general admission tickets. So because you have a North American account, your best bet would be to try to go to the North American Fan Festival. Now, it is possible to get tickets for any region, but it would require help from others. I know that Arthurs and Zeno both went on a worldwide. They went to all 3 of the fan festivals, if memory serves. At the very least, they went to 2. They went to North America and Japan. And that was just because they had to get tickets from players who did play in those regions. Or did have accounts that were registered to those regions. So it's technically possible to go to any of them, but for just firsthand, you would probably be your best bet would probably be going to the North American one. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Haps. Hi. In the past, you've stated you weren't a big fan of the Nier. I think I just said that last week. Of the Nier Alliance raids because you felt they didn't add anything to 14's world or lore. I was wondering if you had any similar feelings about Echoes of Vana'diel so far. Yes, I do feel that way a little bit. Here's the thing. I like that it's using Electrope. I like that it's further using where the gate to Living Memory is. So there are some tie-ins, but what's mostly happened is we're mostly just cross-comparing the 2 worlds and seeing how similar they are. It's very much reminding me of Alexander, where the first 2 raids for Alexander felt like nothing of substance happened, and so I'm hoping something of substance happens in the 3rd one to bring it all full circle. Because you're right, it is mostly Final Fantasy XI fan service, and while it's interesting to see, it isn't offering too much. Like, Surreal Jaw is, his plan is just not impacting the world enough. It's kind of like how Omega was constantly threatening the world, but then we just mostly did everything in the interdimensional rift. But this is like that without the same stakes, or it doesn't feel like it has the same stakes in any capacity. So absolutely, yeah, other than like 2 details, it has enough to do, and I think that they should be intertwining it better into Final Fantasy. Now, here's the thing. We don't really fully understand what the original Vana'diel is to Final Fantasy XIV, and I think that's the question that they need to answer, because Vana'diel, in theory, should not be one of the reflections. And what we're seeing when Surreal Jaw says he falls into the space between worlds is not the other reflections. That seems to be what's being applied. Because here's the thing: either Vana'diel is one of the reflections or it isn't. And until we get lore details that more accurately tie the 2 together, we haven't expanded Final Fantasy XIV's world. Right now, it just seems like he fell into the full-on, like, in between the games interdimensional rift, not even the one from Omega, like the full-on actual one, and is seeing things from outside of the reflections. But those are the details we need, and those hopefully come in the 3rd raid. Because other than that, yeah, I enjoy the little bit of fan service. It's nice getting to tell people and explain these things to people, but I would prefer more world building for Final Fantasy XIV and not, hey, look, that's Final Fantasy XI stuff, you know? Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello there. Hello. Hope you're having a good time zone. Yeah, it's 7:17 a.m. now, so I'd say I'm doing all right. I just watched your Gamescom interview video, which talked about adding a new craft or gather, and the way you spoke about a finite limited job makes me think of big fishing. It's kind of along the lines of the discussion we had earlier. Do you think that angle is worth looking into for a new job, or maybe somehow adding a system similar to Botanist Miner? No, I think the discussion we had earlier was actually the best one. In that it offers just a tiny bit of interaction with the other jobs, but is really more isolated in the sense of its own progression. So I would just say the question that I answered earlier pretty much sums up the way that I would feel and what I think the best options are. And like I said, I might even make a standalone video on that, just to put the idea out into the universe. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Hello. Hello, howdy, hi, salutations, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hi. I think the use of the dash is just an adoption of a nice visual break from the hashtag to improve readability, and it works. I wanted to say thanks for doing content with your community on your streams. There are some bits of content I feel I only got to learn and tackle thanks to snagging a spot in your parties over the past months. It's generally love and appreciate when streamers engage with their community in multiplayer games. On that note, my question. Well, first of all, you're welcome. I don't do it that much. Like, I don't do like Savage learning parties or anything. I just do like maps, Unreals, Alliance raids, you know, things that I think there's not as much pressure on a player's performance versus Savage, where I feel like there's a bit more nerves that come into that. And also, I'm not as interested in doing those with people, so I don't feel like if I'm not interested in generally doing them on stream, that it makes sense for me to then host them on stream. Because if I'm not interested in it, then is it entertaining? Probably not. On that note, my question, what has been your favorite experiences doing things for the community in a game like that? I've witnessed several funny and memorable moments as a viewer, but I'm curious what stands out to you. I don't know, we've had quite a few over the years. I used to do Smite games with subscribers in my earlier days, and we had plenty of fun and hilarious times doing that. And maps are usually the funniest because I do your map, your loop. So there's like a double sense of like jealousy when somebody else gets something really good, but there's also those big like RNG moments that are always worth celebrating. We have so many funny Extreme Trial and Unreal moments, but one that was pretty funny was actually kind of recent. I took 7 people without clears through Zillennia on content, like literally I think the day of or day after Zillennia Extreme came out. And we did a clear, and I was like, okay, let's do another because I need footage for my guide. And then when we cleared it, the mount dropped, and I went, okay, so guys, how valuable is me teaching you the clear? Because I'm looking at that mount, and I'm thinking, I really want it, and I want to know where everyone's head is at right now. And they were just like, I want that mount. And I was like, would you be okay if I took it for $2 million for each person? And everyone went, yes. So that was a funny moment just because I had only been there to teach them Zillennia. But then when the mount dropped, like my head flipped the switch like, I have to get that mount right now. I have to get it right now. This is the one opportunity I have to like be able to coerce the people that I helped. Be like, listen, you remember that time when I helped you guys all get your clears for Zillennia EX so you could go into the PF and do it there? And then would you guys like 2 million on top of that? Yeah, I was just like, okay, please, I gotta turn on the streamer charm for that one. So yeah, that's a very recent one, but I mean, there's so many, and I'm sure there are plenty I've forgotten that are just generally entertaining or funny over the years. Hashtag Monday And then that's it. The hashtag ends. But fortunately, the message continues with Mr. Happy. Hey, an extra hello for the first question from last week. Thank you. My question is, what is one quality of another content creator you envy? Could be anything from their thumbnails to even their background music. I don't envy anything from other content creators. I would instead say that I find inspiration from them. God, just to pick one. I pretty much, I don't know. I don't really do too much like fancy stuff myself, and I always wish I could. There's like video editing bits that I wish I was more apt at, or I could spend more time doing. Okay, so there's an OSRS content creator by the name of Coxie, and he's doing a series where he collects every pet in RuneScape. Again, he's already done it, but now he's doing a video series on it. And whenever he's explaining what the optimal setups are, or like the spots, he basically uses almost like a Tron-esque like simulation of the area. And when I think of that, I was like, man, I wish I could do that for guides, right? Like I wish I could show 8 players in these like, you know, humanoid style setups, and then move them around the map with a really cool anime. I think about that and I'm just like, man, that would be really cool to be able to do that for a guide. And I'd say that's it. It's really things like special effects and video editing, which I could theoretically do. I just don't spend the time to do them because it's just not smart for me in terms of the amount of time to make one video to do all of that. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest qualities. And I feel that way about a lot of creators, but I generally see a lot of creators put in a great deal more effort. But then it's also hard to tell how much of a creator is their own work and how much of a creator is work that they've hired people to do. People who have editors will always accomplish more than me. And there are some people who put out videos less that have better editing. So it's a matter of which of those things would I sacrifice. I don't think I could fairly pay someone to properly do editing. And I don't think it's economically viable for me to pay someone to do thumbnails for me, for example. And then on top of that, I don't think it makes sense for me to spend weeks and weeks editing a video unless it's something I'm really passionate about, and I don't want to pay somebody else to do it. For the same reason, I just don't think I could pay them enough to warrant the work. So that's rough on the other end. So yeah, I'd say that content creators' abilities to lean on others, and it's not even a specific one, but that general quality, and be able to delegate. Whereas I am just kind of a one-man show when it comes to all that, would probably just be a quality that I don't even envy, but I wish I was more apt at. Hashtag Moppies with Mr. Handay. I don't like that. Lolly ho, my good sir, and extra ones for those who didn't do their part. I beg your pardon in advance for my following rambling. Oh boy. I'm the one who asked you about the Switch 2 a month ago. Seeing you didn't answer the second part of the question, I had the console port because of the recent interview teasing real possibilities, thought it would be appropriate to ask that part again. First, if we imagine 14 on Switch 2 ends up becoming a reality, how feasible do you see having special control scheme that takes advantage of the Joy-Con mouse 2 mode? Unlikely. It could be a hybrid between controller and mouse. I mean, the PlayStation version technically has a mouse mode. So I just think it would be equivalent to that. Like, it would just be the equivalent of the other console's mouse mode, but just with the Joy-Cons instead. So, I mean, it's actually probably a foregone conclusion. It's just that something like that is already similarly in the other ones, just uses the touchpad instead. For the second question, it's about side quests and stories. I know the Crystal Tower Alliance raids were first optional like the rest, were made mandatory, but people didn't like it to be forced onto it. Yeah, but they stopped caring. Now that it's so much part of the story, nobody really cares. Like, that complaint is, like, gone. There's a lot of not only interesting story, but also important for lore with a bunch of lovable characters. How bad would it for Yoshi P and Co. to talk about those events if the main story sees? I think that there are some events that are on the... They're on the stage. I'll put them on the pedestal of probably could become main content. I think Eden is very highly up there for something they should probably want people to do, and would be able to use whatever the events there to expand it. We had the optional scene with Gaia in the end of Endwalker, and I hated that was optional, but I loved that they did it in the first place. And I think a lot of people want Gaia to be in the MSQ, especially if whenever there's anything Void related. Unukalhai, Gaia. There's so many characters that are spread out that have connections to that lore. It's just a problem of getting people to do that much content, especially Unukalhai. Unukalhai is locked behind so many series of quests before he gets the conclusion of his story. So, I think some of them inevitably it will happen. I don't know if like Pandemonium or anything else or any other bits will, but whenever it makes sense, I think they will do it. So I wouldn't ever write it off entirely. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello, good sir. Hi. Hope your day is going well. It's going well. I mean, it's still early, but we'll see. Question for you: what is a challenge run you would like to complete? For example, I'm not doing that. No. It doesn't have to be FF related. I've done most of the ones I want to. At this point, it's a matter of which ones am I willing to do. And no Crystarium for 13 seems so uninteresting. That for Final Fantasy X also seems terribly uninteresting. The fact that it's feasible is interesting, but doing it doesn't sound interesting. I think I've done most of the challenge runs that I actually wanted to do. And at this point, it's just a matter of what feasibly I can do in any given title that comes out in the future. Some games I just like to enjoy. Like, more often than not, I just like to enjoy games. And it's rare that I find that a challenge run or a challenge mode or some sort of self-imposed restriction actually improves upon the game experience for me. Zodiac Age's New Game Minus is one of the few times I felt like this absolutely improved my experience of the game in terms of how it forced me to interact with the game and the world and to try to figure out where things were. So that's kind of my bottom line. Really, it's like that's the line with which I draw all challenges against is Zodiac Age's New Game Minus, and as such, I don't really have an answer. I just like to beat games more than anything else and get trophies and all that stuff. So that's kind of it. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, hello, hi. I saw your repost with all the release date breakdowns. I was doom and gloom as your first release date prediction for sure. Question is, can you now elaborate on the Whirlwind release of content? Quote, this changes your thoughts at all. What does Whirlwind mean? I actually think Whirlwind is just referring to the time between JP FanFest and the release of the expansion. I actually think that's all it is. I don't think there's anything else. I don't think it means they're going to speed up the patch schedule. I don't think it means they're going to be like releasing a billion forms of content no, I think it's literally just the pace from JP FanFest to the expansion releasing is going to be so much back-to-back news that it'll be a whirlwind pace. That's all. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello there. Hi. I'm curious how you feel about non-instance content like hunts and fates and what the game could do to make them a little more compelling. I feel like these types of content are things that are in most need of attention. The devs themselves have said that there are issues with content being too niche, and they feel extremely niche when they should be more engaging. Shared fates and bicolor gemstones are interesting, but I feel like don't present enough value to entice the average player. Same with hunt currencies. I also feel like the bare minimum you could do is use them to get relevant gear as an alternate progression path. I also think we should get new S ranks, at least one new world boss fate at like the midpoint of an expansion's life cycle, just to reinvigorate things and get people out and about more. I know fates are never going to be as engaging as raids. It would be nice to have reasons to do a few rounds every now and again, but I don't see a little bit more effort making them interesting. Stormblood having a single unique type of fate that has never been replicated comes to mind. So, there's a lot of things you could do to make them more interesting. I think fates just being worth more EXP, quite frankly, would be enough. I think updating bicolor gemstone rewards to include more patch-relevant rewards for crafting and gathering would be fine. I think fates being involved on expansion for the relic quests are always going to be okay. Or at least as an alternative path. Listen, if I could spend bicolor gemstones instead of tomes on these freaking items for the relic, I would do it. Okay? I would absolutely do it. Especially if the EXP was good and I still had jobs that was being leveled. That would 100% compel me. I've also suggested getting an extra world boss in the middle of the expansion. I've had that same feeling before because I feel like you said, it does get players out there. And as for the gear, I think that just involving it in the crafted set gives it market value, which then improves the likelihood that people will go do it, but it does also improve the likelihood that they will be botted, which has already happened. Eureka used to be botted a lot, and then that all moved to Fates for the most part because of bicolor gemstones and the vouchers. I think it's really just a matter of feeling like they basically just put all the rewards that are most relevant right at the beginning, and everyone who wants them gets them, and then it goes away. So they just don't continue to incentivize after that fact. As for alternate gear progression, I mentioned it briefly earlier in the same video, but you have to bear in mind that alternate gear progression needs to not eliminate the reason to do other things as well. And that's where the whole, you know, items being as simple as they are kind of bites them in the behind, because they can't like make a ring that just comes from fates that does something, you know. I mean, honestly, if they just incorporated gear that increased bicolor gemstone drops as well, or I don't know, increased EXP from fates in a certain level range, like there are things that they could add that would make fading further more valuable. I also think, as I've been playing OSRS, that rare drops that can come from fates are actually a good idea. I wouldn't mind a minion that just randomly has a really low % chance of dropping from fates in each zone, for example. Yeah, I wouldn't say no to that. That would definitely get me out there. But there's a number of things they can do. But I think the first and foremost, fates in particular, hunts are fine. Hunts don't need to be incentivized any further. Hunts are done to death. The only thing they could do to hunts is raise the HP of the lower ones so that they better reflect the activity that the hunt regularly gets. But for fates, yeah, no, at the bare minimum, they need to increase the EXP. They nerfed the EXP. They've made everything else better EXP-wise, but fates have remained the same, and they have remained not super relevant in that regard, and I feel like you need to make them relevant in that regard. So that's the bare minimum, but any of the other things I suggested would probably help as well. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello, Haps. How are you? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I have a couple of questions regarding the difficulty in this current Savage tier. My static has been working on M6S ads and M7S Enrage since May. Are these the two main DPS checks in the tier, or does M8S present a more difficult challenge? And is there any content in the game that you or your team has found too difficult to overcome? I'll say this. DPS check is not how I would consider those two fights. You're hitting Enrage not because of a DPS check. With the amount of weeks and gear that's been made available, while DPS may be the result, like you may be like, well, we hit Enrage, so our DPS isn't enough. At this point, with the amount of gear available, it is, and I hate to be direct about it, it is a player skill problem. They have given you more than enough gear to circumvent the difficulty at this point. There's been weeks and weeks of tomes. You've been clearing, you know, you said working on M6S ads, so I'm assuming you made it past M6, so you're talking about M7 and Rage. You've got weeks and weeks of those first two slots. There's now, if you had any slots that weren't upgraded, you could upgrade crafted gear, you could upgrade the, you could grab the Alliance raid gear, and that would get you a few more item levels, right? Like that, you're basically, you're pretty close to the power. And at this point also, people could have been collecting tome weapons, and soon they'll be able to upgrade them too. So it's like, I would not say at this point DPS checks as a whole is the problem. The problem is the way people are playing up to the Enrage is clearly the thing that needs to improve most. So that's not your question, but I'll say this. M8S, I'm not going to say it presents them. It is more difficult than M6 and N7, that's for certain. But the problem is not that M8S is going to be harder for the DPS check. It's that it's going to be harder mechanically. And thus, if players cannot improve and are not trying to improve, then meeting that DPS check will, in essence, be harder. So at the end of the day, when a tier has been out for a really long time, it's been out for like 6 months at this point, almost like 5.5 months. It is at the point where the players should be kind of introspecting and being like, what can I do to improve my play? And you get these really long, drawn-out static scenarios where you just get stuck in fights. A lot of the time, it's because players just kind of show up and do it, and they don't really think about how to improve at it. And just over time, eventually, like without thinking about it, there's a difference between the amount of skill that goes up without trying, just naturally from repetition, and the amount that goes up from actively trying to improve your actual play. So, yeah, M8S is going to be a problem. For the DPS for the crew, because your DPS isn't going to get that much better between now and then, and especially with the first phase, yeah, it's going to be a problem. Is there any content in game that you or your team found too difficult to overcome? I've had teams that have difficulty overcoming things. I'm not gonna say never. I very rarely ever felt like I am mechanically overwhelmed by something, but I also don't play tank or healer. I play pew 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 bard. And, you know, at that point, who even cares, right? Like, my opinion's invalid anyway. So, yeah, no, I personally have never felt, like, too overwhelmed by anything. I just kind of take things as they go, except that you make a few mistakes and, you know, improve and move on and do better. And that's it, kind of. Okay, there are so many questions left, and this recording is already really long, so I'm going to blast through a couple of them here. Yo, can you explain the difference between the shards and the planet Meteon visited? So we don't fully understand that. As far as we know, the planet that we are on has been split into multiple reflections, but that same kind of weird interdimensionalness does not apply to other planets. It wasn't like the universe was split that many times. That's as far as we understand it, but I don't think we've actually gotten hard confirmation of that. So those are two different things. Like, just treat the 13 shards as kind of like a pocket dimension, and the other planets is just, there's just one version of that planet, most likely. Then we have, welcome to my comment. Do you know how many jobs will be added to Occult Crescent? 3 in 0.4x, I believe, and then another 6, I believe. They did tell us. I'm almost certain they told us. So a total of 9 more jobs, I'm pretty certain, is going to be added to Occult Crescent, if my memory is served. Apologies if my memory isn't correct, but I'm almost certain it's at the very least 3 for 0.4x, 0.45 most likely. Will you ask UGP when we get some type of content like 11's campaign? I don't think 11's campaign is good content. I just don't think it's a good idea. Not in like, maybe you could do something like that in an exploration zone, but that's about it. Why it's got to have to be instance duty instead of an open zone? Because it has complete rule changes, so it's easier to program it when you're completely altering the rules, and to make sure that anyone in there is committed to doing the content in there. Like, if people go there and then they're not committed to doing the content in there, then they're just kind of cluttering the area, and it just is kind of a strange thing to do. Cosmic, on the other hand, is like super slow paced. It doesn't really need to be hyperactive, and you don't need to be constantly participating to make it work. So it's fine there. But in Occult, if you're there and you're just like, oh, I just like being here, then it kind of just works against the entirety of the zone. But yeah, it's also because the rule changes make it so it just has to be designed as a completely different instance as a whole. Hey, Happy, what are the current, given the current ultimates, what do you hope the next ultimate is? Oh, it should be Shadowbringers MSQ. It's probably Warrior of Light and Hades. So I wouldn't expect it to be anything else. And I also don't ever want top difficulty again. It was not fun. DSR is fine. I think if we got another DSR, it would go a lot faster. But top was just, no, don't want that. Are you planning to do some OSRS beginner guides? There's so many out there. There's nothing I could offer people that hasn't been said a million times about OSRS. And also, mine wouldn't be guides. They would be new player experiences. The problem is that most people are going to recommend, oh, you make a new character and you try to go do waterfall quests in Witch's House, and you do all these like really high rewarding quests before actually skilling anything. And then you realize as a new player, you're just being told to run all around a world you don't even fully understand. So OSRS is really a matter of just, you go in with whatever you want to do, and then as soon as you feel like you're lacking direction, you look up things low-level players do. So I don't think I have too much valuable to add to that discussion. This is probably an unpopular opinion in response to the question about new job actions with each expansion. I don't think something new needs to be added every time. Our hotbars are only so big. It's poor marketing if there's not something new. People will just... Some people like things remaining very static and the same, but most people want something new. They'll be like, oh, there's no job updates this expansion. People would fucking riot. Even if it was just new visual animations and skill effects, people would riot. 8.0 especially, people really need something new. Like, that's been made abundantly clear. But there has to be a shiny new button somewhere that makes people feel better about what they're playing and feel like they're actually making some form of character progression. Most people want that. They don't want to stay exactly the same. So when playing since a Realm Reborn, I found a way to, I always found that I retain and engage so much more with the cutscenes that are voiced versus, yeah, I mean, I'd say everyone does. They're very drawing how it jumps back and forth. Any idea what the rhyme or reason is? Well, cost and time. It's literally the same thing as most everything else in the game. It's cost and time, specifically. So, yeah, Realm Reborn in particular was thrown together very haphazardly in less than 3 years from 1.x. So, suffers a lot from that. Hashtag Mondays, hello from Mexico. How dare you tease us on that twist story? What game was it? One where you said where 6, 7, if... I don't remember from last week. I unfortunately don't recall what... I don't remember what I said, so it's hard for me to answer. Been a long time user. The SteelSeries Rival 500 started to show signs. Oh, dude, I got a spare in case I ever need to go back to it. 500 being discontinued. Buying a new one is more expensive than a PS5. Oh, you mean buying a new Rival 500? Do you know any mouse that's close to the 500s? I don't know any mouse that's similar to the 500's atypical layout. I love the 500. I get why they stopped doing it, but man, unfortunate because it was good. Yeah, no, I don't know of any mouse that has a similar layout to the Rival 500. Less of a question, more of commentary. Enjoyed your 11 videos. What's inspired me? Picked a good month to start Shantoto 2. Story is better to me. Still trying to figure out how skill chains and Magic Burst work. Any advice for syncing up skill chains with trusts? Honestly, until you actually sit down and learn all of the elements to the different weapon skills, it's really about just trying to find recommendations or just using your weapon skills and seeing if your trusts can seeing if your trusts will react to them. That's probably the best bet that you have, is to just start throwing decent weapon skills. If the weapon skill sucks, just don't use it. But if you're using a bunch of trusts and you throw a weapon skill out, and then your trusts follow up with it, that means you've at least got something. And then from there, you can experiment afterwards. But unfortunately, unless you go to like the wiki page and read all the elements and remember them, it's a pain. It's a big pain. Hello, Mrhappy. Hope this future week has been good. My question this week includes a little bit of a ramble, but it's new characters post 6.0. There have been a lot of fantastic characters. First, I feel after their initial character arcs, almost every single character gets put in a position where they would just have a hard time joining up for another adventure. I feel that way about most of the previous to 6.0 ones, but they managed to make it work all the same. So I don't know. They've got 2 or 3 character arcs to really flesh them out as individuals, and this next story arc has not really left any characters to be developed, because we're probably going to get new characters to be developed. And it means that we're concluding character arcs that we can call back on when we need them, but not making it so it's mandatory that it feels like we'll have to call back on them. It's something that will make sense in the moment and not a moment before that. That's been true of especially a lot of the city-states that we freed. I mean, whenever we have to go back to Ishgard or do something there, we have plenty of people there. Whenever we have to go back to Alamigo, we have plenty of people there that we can rely upon. But they're not like, oh, we have to go back to these locations. We're effectively creating allies and creating a bigger network of individuals that we know without forcing ourselves to be like reliant on them to continue to progress their character arcs in order for us to progress ours. Hey, Haps, random, but my friend recently did MSQ and told me that Sphene shows up as Zoomancer, which is some sort of it's a life mancer. It's basically what Zoemancer means. Zoe's also a skill for Sage as well. Asking this any indication of future job? No. They have all sorts of different names for the jobs. I mean, Alphino is academician. There we go. They've had all sorts of weird names for trusts. You can't look at any of them as any sort of indication of anything, pretty much, as we have a big history of them. And I think this is the last question, and oh my god. And I don't even know if I can get into it. Standalone video, catch time. I know quite a few people who do modding. They also tried to get me in. Either way, I know the infrastructure behind it very well. I'm wondering if Square Enix is really behind the cease and desist. A plugin itself isn't technically forbidden according to the terms of service. A program that loads it would be forbidden according to be an easy thing to just ban the launcher. Anything that alters game files. And I know you're saying that the mod isn't what changes the game files, but it is the file it is actually the code that is being changed. So it is against the terms of service. Plugin didn't directly interact with the game. No, but it enabled everything, which you just said in the previous one, something that bans the launcher. Mare is effectively a launcher. It's just a launcher for syncing them. So it is actually the biggest problem because according to the owner, this was asked before Yoshi P's post. So I would say this probably just stands as reading this post, and that Yoshi P made it very clear that as long as you just keep it to yourself, it's fine. But as soon as it starts being, just go read Yoshi P's post. This was asked before Yoshi P's post, so I would probably just go do that. Because I feel like just looking at his post and looking at what I'm reading here, it's explained pretty well there. And thus, it's probably worth just doing that. And there's a bunch of comments under it as well. I'm not going to get too much into those because this video is already like an hour long. So with that is going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mrhappy. You guys had so many questions this week. I'm over an hour into my recording before I edit it down, to which it'll be a little bit under an hour. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to ask your questions in next week's ask your questions in the comments section for next week's episode. And thanks for watching. Enjoy the content that comes out this week as well, and I will see you next time. Until then, take care.